This next speaker goes by. No, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. You can do a dance. No, okay. Julianne Horvath goes by Nerdcore on the internet. It's with 3 R's, no E's. Well, 1 E at the end. She's a very not terrible dodgeball player on one of the GitHub teams. She's a designer at GitHub and the host and organizer or co-organizer of passion projects. She's a very good human and is not afraid to call you on your bullshit when you need to be called on your bullshit.
I'm not going to look as cool as Brian holding this mic. Not going to be as cool. I want to start out by thanking Shane. This is a really cool experience. I feel incredibly honored to be here speaking amongst all these amazing people. If we could just clap for Shane again, I think that's really rad. I have lots of notes, so it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's that I'm preparing to blow your minds. So I want to start out with a little story about my introduction to San Francisco, actually. I'm from San Francisco. I'm actually from the East Bay, south of Oakland, California. How many people here know where Oakland is? Oh, sweet. I love Oakland. So that's where I'm from. I moved to San Francisco to go to school, and I'm going to tell you first about one of my experiences in a classroom. I am also biracial. There's an amazing blog post that someone just put out. It's entitled Coming Out as Biracial. I recommend you read that if you're confused as to why this very white girl is calling herself biracial. It turns out there's this thing called genetics. And it's pretty much chance with whose features you end up with. But so I'm biracial. I am half Mexican and half white. My mother is from Texas and is very, very, very European white. Or at least that's what she told me. So I started school at the University of San Francisco, and it was immediately like a very affluent school. A lot of white people, nice white folk, and it's always been a little overwhelming to me to be around mostly white people because that's not how I grew up. I grew up in a very diverse environment. I was one of 10 identified white kids at my high school. And so it's always been a little awkward, and I've always felt a little privileged for having been able to blend in and not really stand out. But there were specific conversations that were had in classrooms that made me incredibly uncomfortable. And I kind of just wanted to share this with you because it's pretty unbelievable that this happens in our profit centers, as someone referred to them earlier. So this conversation originated while we were discussing why specific immigrant groups occupied certain parts of San Francisco. And the conversation quickly devolved into why white people were the most wealthy, predominantly in the US. And that was already a little hard, but then, these words were said verbatim: white people are the richest because they work the hardest. And I was 18, I think, at this point, and terrified. Like, my jaw was just kind of on the floor at this point, but I don't think that anybody really noticed why I was upset. And I was looking around trying to find an ally, trying to make eyes with someone who was like, yeah, this shit's crazy. Didn't come easy, but it got even worse. It got to the point where the class decided, with help from the instructor, that white people, lived on they didn't want to live next to ethnic people because ethnic people were always asking them for money. And and as someone I don't know, it was a really weird thing for me because I don't think people expect me to be upset about that. In that article I mentioned, the girl talks a lot about how people will say really racist shit in front of her because they think, oh, you're white. Like, of course that's okay. It's really not okay. Anyways, at that point, it was made really clear to me that there wasn't space for people like me in that institution. And I didn't really quite experience that again until I joined tech, or technology. But this is a different kind of space. I mean, there definitely isn't a lot of diversity as far as ethnicity goes or background, but there's also not a lot of gender diversity. I'm gonna refer to my notes. This is an incredibly personal story for me, by the way. It's the first time I've told it. And do you guys all know what Chatham House rules are? What I say stays here. I would really appreciate it. I'd like to go home to a job. That would be really awesome. I kept my... Okay. So I recently took a trip to Rwanda, and it was an amazing experience for me. And I tried really hard to sit down with people and connect with them. Just know what their life is like day to day, like what are their challenges, try to see if I could even relate to them in any way possible. It was definitely the most culturally different place I've ever been. But one thing, I was having a conversation with a young lady by the name of Diana, and she kind of summed up her attitude towards feeling marginalized. And she said, you just learn to accept your circumstances. And for some reason, there's this really fucked up part in me that says, no, fuck that. Like, I've always had this idea in my head that no, people deserve more than that. And especially the people I know who, are my friends and my family, and I don't think they deserve less because they're women. I don't think they deserve less because they're Mexican or black or, subscribe to any kind of specific religion. There's all of these different facets of life, and I don't think anyone deserves less because of them. So I told myself then, back in school, back after that happened, I went home crying, by the way, just bawling, because I didn't know what to do. There's nothing you really can do. I didn't feel like anything I could say could change those people's minds. It seemed like they were pretty made up about it and pretty sure about their conclusions in school, at least. I was just really shocked, and I went home and I just, I cried a lot, and I called my mom, and she was like, Julie, there's just idiots everywhere. Like, you're always going to run into those people. Don't let them see you, drown. So I told myself that day, I said, the harder I push now for people like me, the more space I can make for them, or the easier it will be for them to follow in my footsteps. So previous to college, my childhood was a lot about turning disadvantages into an edge and letting them inform my decision making. And I hit kind of a bump when I got into college. So 20%, just to get some statistics about the area I'm from and what I hear I'm articulate. I got a lot in high school. It's like, Julie, why you talk so white? And I'm like, I'm white. That's why I talk so white. And also TV. I just watched a lot of TV when I was younger, probably cartoons, and it just made me sound like a snob, I guess. So 20% of students at my high school are accepted into college. 6% of those students finish or graduate with a degree. I graduated 11th in my high school class of 657 and nearly failed every single one of my college classes when I got there. I was really behind, and that was just based on the public education system that I came from. I was smart within the context of Hayward, or within the place I come from, but not nationally, at least not competitively. So life kind of drove me into the arms of the internet, actually. I wanted to know how to catch up, and I wanted to know what I could learn to kind of fake my way into feeling like I'm on the same level or the same playing field as everybody else that I saw around me. I knew I was just as smart as them. I just didn't know what skills I could provide in order to be compensated the same way that they are. So life is all about making adjustments. I hate sports analogies usually, but it really is a game of inches. And so I started to learn to make adjustments. I left college early. My first startup boss asked me, Julie, how much do you need to leave college full time? And I was like, 45 grand. And he was like, oh, sure, you got it. I didn't realize at the time that I was being incredibly lowballed, because to me, that seemed like a lot of money. My mom retired after 35 years of working for the court system. She retired at a salary of $50K. And so to me, I was like, holy shit, in a year, I'm going to outpace my own mom. I didn't realize that the class gap was that big or that wide. And so I took a very low salary, and I wish I hadn't, basically, because it kind of set the stage for how I expected to be treated and paid and dealt with in the future. So I really always felt like there was a chip on my shoulder from both my childhood and my education. And I think that chip really showed a lot. I think it came out in resentful ways and mean jokes and, unfortunately, things I can't take back. But once I got into my 20s, I realized I could choose who I want to be. When I was a kid, I didn't have a choice in what environment I got put in. But when once I realized that I was free of that environment, it was up to me to make my own. The phase I'm going through right now is making peace with who I am. My past, and also where I come from. There's this amazing moment in the movie Away We Go. Has anyone seen that movie? It's a focus feature. It's incredible. Maya Rudolph. So this amazing story that she tells in the movie, and she says, so she grew up on this big, like, plantation-type house on the Mississippi, and she said that they had an orange tree outside of their house. And she says that her dad would go outside every day and look if this thing sprouted fruit, because he really, it was like a hope thing for him. And so every day he would do this, and every day nothing would grow. And so one day, her mom and her sister went and glued a bunch of plastic fruit to the tree. And they hid in the truck, and they waited for their dad to come. And when he came, she said that for a moment, it felt real. For like a moment, he believed that the tree had magnificently sprouted all of, like, bananas and grapes and all of these things that don't grow together. But what I took that to mean is really, like, you make your own family, like, you make your own future. You get to choose what things you keep in your life and what things you can push out and what people. And I think this is just like a really beautiful metaphor for friendship and the people you want to work with as well. So when I first heard about GitHub, I was really in love with the idea of it. I love the idea of open technology because that's how I learned. I'm all self-taught, and I learned from dicking around on the internet. Like, I learned from opening up Web Inspector and learning how to reading other people's code. And so I love the idea of GitHub as being central to that idea of openness. And what I loved about GitHub it wasn't built around a single person. It was built around a single idea, and that's open source. And it's such a powerful idea that it always outshined any of the founders. And it seemed like everyone had an equal investment in the openness of the web. But from the moment I joined GitHub, I started fighting a very hard fight. From basic communication things to being told to watch my tone, which is, if you're a feminist, probably the one thing that just like makes your skin crawl. I've had some pretty terrible experiences, but I'm still in love with what GitHub stands for because I think it's bigger than any of us. I think the idea of open source and being able to contribute to a community is an amazing idea that none of us can kill. So one of the hardest truths or lessons that I had to learn was that people won't do the right thing. People won't do the right thing if it even slightly inconveniences them, or their personal lives, or their day-to-day. My big thing with who I work with and trust is like, can I trust you to be the person you say you are? It doesn't matter if we're different, if we think different things, if we believe in different things, but can I trust you to be the person you say you are? I ran into someone who I felt I couldn't. And this person was supposed to be leading me. And that was so hard for me. It was heartbreaking for me to deal with. I honestly felt like I was looking at a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that I was the only one who could see it. The thing about growing up kind of in the ghetto, I feel ridiculous when I say that out loud. The thing about growing up there is you know who the bad people are. Like, you can see them. They're people, they're drug dealers. They're people who carry guns. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's sneaky people there as well, but in our industry, they're sneakier. Like, you don't know who they are until it's time for them to make the decision between right and wrong. I felt in a lot of ways that I had been lied to. I felt alone and afraid and really threatened. It took me back to this place, like I only had myself to depend on, and it made me distrust everyone, not just this one person. Some of this is my own problem. My coping plate was totally full. But a lot of it was the environment. It was toxic. It was people refusing to acknowledge a problem because it was inconvenient for them. And I was doing the only thing I knew how to do, nothing. At the time, I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to tell anyone what was going on because I'd lose my job, but I was miserable, misled, and severely disillusioned. I was mostly afraid to rock the boat, disturb the utopia that my friends had made a home. For some reason, I let this negative situation consume me. I felt my world collapsing in on itself and on me. I was drowning and I was stuck. I was looking for guidance, and it wasn't until I looked out into the community that I found that guidance that I really needed, or my truth. There's a wonderful woman by the name of Jen Myers, and she's a designer developer. She works at Dev Bootcamp, but she is a fantastic writer. And I stumbled upon her blog post first before any of her work. And it's an amazing piece called How to Avoid Feminist Burnout. I'm going to read you this portion that really kind of switched the light on for me and really just kicked me in the ass. It takes a lot of courage to tell people in a position of power and privilege that they are doing something wrong, and even more courage to withstand the abuse you will take as a result of that. In order to do it, you have to grow a thick skin and learn how to stand your ground. But when making sure they don't get away with their bullshit, it's equally important not to let their bullshit dictate the rules of the game. Remember the saying, never wrestle with a pig. You get dirty and the pig likes it. Quote continues, be kind to people, even those who aren't kind to you. This may sound like it takes more energy out of you than meeting hate with hate. I once thought so. But hate takes so much more energy out of you. So much more. You don't have to lavish kindness on assholes. But forgive them and move on. Chances are they're horribly unhappy and confused themselves. Your hatred will only strengthen their defensiveness and exhaust you. Also, there's always the chance that one of them just needs someone to be kind to them to consider a different viewpoint. So after reading that, I decided to stop lending the toxicity the power it needed to survive or sustain itself, and put all of my energy into creating the right environment so that the next time doing the right thing could maybe be easier to choose, to make clearer what's wrong and what's right, and to surface and give power to the voices who have rightfully deserved it. It's hard to remember this, but it's a really good staple of mine now. It's everyone is doing their best. Some people's best really fucking suck. Like, sometimes I have to look at people and I'm like, God, your best sucks today. Your best is making my life hell, but it's your best. And I gotta take it, man. I gotta take it. So it's a really great thing to remember, you know, when people are being dicks. So about a year ago, I came up with an idea. And I was like, you know what? I actually know a lot of really badass women. I felt trampled after that whole negative incident, and I wanted to put my, all of my frustration into something positive. And so I was like, you know what? I know I've been following and, you know, keep taking tabs on all these fantastic women that I think would give amazing talks. And I want to bring them here to GitHub, and I want them to stand up in front of a room of all men, all women, whatever, and I want them to speak their truth. And I want people to be more exposed to women as leaders. And so in this next part of the talk, in which I call Changing the World by One Sneaky Maneuver at a Time, I created a repo under my personal account, privacy, and I basically came up with the idea for passion projects, which is, if you haven't seen it at all, it's an all-female talk series where I invite women from all walks of tech, community management, it's really loud, helicopters, engineers, designers, everything in between. Jessica Hish, who's here, has given a talk at Passion Projects. And so I decided to I came up with this idea, very small seed, and I created a repo for it, and I did all the legwork. Like, you know, people are very comfortable if you hand them bulleted lists, you know, so I'm like, oh, I'll just make all these bulleted lists for all these people. But I decided I was just going to do it, and I was going to wait until someone told me no. I got really tired of everyone talking about how we should hire more women, and this is coming out of the same men who refuse to treat me as their peer. And it's funny, I actually got an email the other day that was like, how are women at GitHub? And I was like, go ask them. I don't speak for them. That's a weird thing to ask. Really fun, really fun. You know, and a lot of this stuff's not malicious. I think it's just really people have no fucking idea what they're saying. Or they just come from a different world, which is okay too. It's all of our jobs to educate them, to correct them. Kind of lost my part. Oh, anyway, so I put this all into repo, and we have these things called GitHub Summits. We used to do them every 6 months, now we do them once a year. But everyone has the opportunity to give a lightning talk for 5 minutes. So it was perfect, because one of my colleagues and one of my founders got up right before me and talked about how important it would be for us to focus on hiring women developers. And I was like, oh, great, this talk again. And so right after that, I was like, I have something. And I like go up and I pitch passion projects to them. And I'm like, these are the speakers I want to invite. And I'm like, oh, GitHub, will you bankroll this? And I put them completely on the spot, because I was like, oh, but you really care about women developers, so this is clearly something. This is like you just said, I recorded it. Pretty ballsy. And lo and behold, the only founder sitting in the front row. Poor guy, I feel really bad about this, actually. He had all the pressure on him to, you know, say it. And I was like, hey, if they're going to say no to me, they're going to say no in front of 200 people. And I wanted to make it as easy for women to say yes to speaking in this series, so I wanted them to pay for travel, hotel, transportation costs. I wanted it to be super flexible. I wanted to have them pick the month they came and spoke. I wanted them to speak about anything they wanted to speak about, and GitHub was going to sit there and listen. So, poor Tom in the front. I think he felt the pressure of 200 employees breathing down his neck, but he gave me the thumbs up. And I was like, great, I'm going to run with this until someone gets in my way. So that was the birth of Passion Project. So I got up into that. That was really fun. And then what I did was I transferred the repo over to GitHub, and I said, okay, let's crowdsource. I already had a list. I wanted to do something really special for these women, because I think that as a woman in tech, you get blanketed with just email after email, like, come speak at our event because you're a woman. And I was like, that's kind of lame. Like, I want these people to feel really badass and special. Like, they've caught my attention. They've caught my coworkers' attention. I want them to feel great. And so what I did was I super stalked them on the internet. I got all of their addresses. And then I continued I'm mostly a web designer. I'm really comfortable with drawing boxes in HTML and CSS. It's great. But I challenged myself because and the thing about being a designer and starting something like this, I was able to do all of the creative work for this, like basically on my own, and just ship it. And I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll just do it. And so I, without like any approval, I was just like, no, this is happening. That's what you got to tell people. You got to tell them, no, it's just happening. Don't let them ask questions. That's the bad part. And so so that's really bad. So I designed like these personalized invites that were probably pretty horrible, but I was so proud of them. When you send something to print, it's not like putting it on the web, because in the web I can push a page build of something in 8 seconds. When I send something to print, I'm shaking and pouring sweat, just like, because I'm like, if I fucked it up, oh well. But again, no one had given me a budget, so that was fun. But anyway, so I printed these invitations, super stocked them for their addresses, and I just mailed out all these invitations we had these really special GitHub only hoodies that had a pink Octocat on it, and it was reserved only for staff and the significant others of staff. But I wanted to kind of like invite these women into like our secret club. Like, I wanted them to feel really special, and I wanted them to know that we really appreciate the work that they're doing in technology. whether or not they're a COO, whether or not they're a designer or developer. I think it doesn't matter. Like, badass women really, really matter in our community. And so I sent these invites out, and then I had surgery. So I actually, no, first it was the website. So I made a website because that's how things get real. Things are real if they have a web page, by the way. No one can stop me now. Anyway, so I sent out the invites, and I had surgery, and I was sick for about 3 weeks, and then I start getting these, so literally like a physical collapse. But I started getting all these emails back because I had left on the invite, reply to passion@github.com if you're interested in speaking. And I start getting flooded with all of these emails where people are just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so excited. Like, thank you so much for all this stuff. And even the few people who couldn't make it, they said, I'm going to wear this hoodie every day. So, I created like this group of super fans amongst this incredibly talented group of women. And I was really proud of that. And so I was like, oh shit, that was like my oh shit moment where I was like, oh shit, now I actually have to do the legwork. Like, I actually have to make this happen. But it's weird because the team that formed around passion projects, it happened totally organically. Like, our AV team and production team was like, oh, we should stream these. We should put them everywhere on the internet. We should record them. And they have been amazing ever since then. The team has formed organically because I think everyone on that team really cares about the purpose or the goal. Whether or not everyone at GitHub cares, I can't really be sure. But my friend Kirsty tells me that there was a GitHub before passion projects and there was a GitHub after. I'm really into that. That's really cool. So anyway, so I had nailed down a few speakers in real life so that I wouldn't come up empty-handed if the boxes never made their way to all the invitees. I need to go back to my notes. Okay, cool. And then, here's the website. So since then, here's my wrap up. We've done 7 talks. We've received 53 speaker suggestions. We've been covered in a ton of press, VentureBeat, Forbes, Business Insider. But I think the thing I'm most excited about is, like, this is my Kane's Arcade. Like, it's an avenue to meet incredible women and to see them meet other incredible women. And I hope I get to see that grow a lot, and I want to recreate that in other places, not just San Francisco. I can't really measure those things, but a really great tangible byproduct is that I get to hire women to run the events. So I hire all female photographers. Jessica, the past speaker, Jessica Hish, designed our logo. The website's completely designed and built by a woman, me. I count, right? And I only ask the ladies to collaborate on all of the blog posts with me announcing the events because I think their opinion, they hold a little weight there. There's a lot of satisfaction in creating more jobs for fantastic women. So if you've ignored me this whole time, here are the things you need to know. There's only 3 of them. Try to focus on the positive list. So let's say, I had that one really negative situation over here. This is my cons list of life. This is the shit making my life hell. And then here are usually a ton of people literally assaulting me with kindness, doing amazing things for me, supporting me, showing up to passion, Mark Otto gets up and moves furniture for me before passion projects. Like, I don't know. I think we spend too much time focusing on the small problems and giving them too much attention. I wish we'd focus more of that on the positive parts of our lives and how to grow and sustain that. The next is, if you went to XOXO Fest the first, no? Anyone? Cool. So Dan Harmon gave a really interesting talk, I hear, but I really liked what he had to say about building communities. And his I think the quote was, you could correct me, Willow, if I was wrong, is stand on the rooftops and shout until you find your people. Just that, like, that's amazing. This is me standing on top of a rooftop and shouting, and I've gotten to meet so many amazing women and connected them with other amazing women, and it really is like my Kane's Arcade. Like, I sit there before every talk, and I just have this big smile on my face. It's pretty amazing. And be a lighthouse. So the last speaker, Leslie Bradshaw, really, really dove in on this concept of, like, whatever you believe in, be that lighthouse for other people like you. And it's similar to what Dan Harmon's had to say about, you know, screaming on top of a rooftop. I don't know how to like gesture that appropriately. But be the lighthouse for people like you. Make more room for them, make more space for them. It's incredibly important, and I think it's up to all of us to be lighthouses. And also, if other people don't like it, fuck them. They don't have to live with who you become. You have to live with who you become. That's it.